Thank you, Shelley. So I'm not going to steal any thunder by telling you what this panel is about. You're going to have to listen to the thunder yourselves, but it's going to be good. We have three exciting speakers here. First, Lonnie Adelman, the Chief Executive Officer of iAssay. Lonnie is the founder and CEO, and their focus is on cloud-connected point of care. He is a 30-year veteran of biotechnology, medical device, high-tech, and consumer products industries. And he's been affiliated with a number of startups and Fortune 10 companies in a lot of capacities. He's started some other companies and things like that. It sounds like we're both serial entrepreneurs. And we're excited to have Lonnie up first. Second will be my good friend and colleague, Dr. Stephen Shaya. Stephen graduated summa cum laude from all of the schools he attended, including getting his medical training at Wayne State University Medical School. And he now is the Chief Medical Officer for J&B Medical in Wixom, Michigan. It was started in 1996, and they have 16 different business enterprises with customers in 48 states and 28 countries, primarily with medical supplies, but also now in telehealth. It's a very innovative company and a leading company in medical supplies in the world. And he's also been recognized as a Knight of Grace for the Knights of Malta, a number of other awards, including from the United Nations, and most recently, can I announce the thing from the ADA? No, can I say that? No. Father of the Year for the American Diabetes Association. And I've seen a picture of the Pope blessing Stephen's newest baby, so that's true. That's all true. And then batting cleanup, Nathaniel Lacktman, who is a partner at Foley Lardner and is chair of their Telemedicine Industry Team. And he is also the co-chair of the firm's digital health group and advises hospitals, healthcare providers, and technology companies on legal issues around telehealth. So he'll be touching on those types of things. He's also on the executive committee of the American Telemedicine Association's Business and Finance Group, and has helped draft comments and legislation and policy input on telehealth to various state lawmakers, the DEA, and the Congressional Research Service. So welcome, Lonnie Adelman.
Thank you. Well, hello everybody. Lonnie Adelman, CEO of iAssay. I'm really glad to be here. I got way more out of this meeting than I thought I would. I learned what interoperability is, even though I've been doing it for 30 years. I just didn't know what you called it. So I'm going to show you something today that you've never seen before, and that's going to revolutionize what's done in home care. Now I'm an engineer, but I have to figure out how to use this thing. Okay. So we're out of San Diego, California. There's got to be a few who are saying, wow, that's the best place in the country to live, the best weather, but that's not right. Sometimes it's bad. Sometimes it gets down to below 70, maybe 69. It's about what it was when I left. We're at the crossroads, both as a region in the US and as a company, of wireless diagnostics and analytics. You probably know we have Qualcomm in San Diego and Google phones and UCSD and Scripps with the diagnostics piece. And analytics, we have the two biggest sequencing companies in the country for sure. The old Life Technologies and Illumina. So we're perfectly positioned, we're in the right place, and we're now going to introduce a system. I'll tell you a little bit more after this is what it looks like. I'll describe it a little bit more in detail in future slide. So what we do is we're completely changing things up. In home care today, if a lab is done, the nurse will draw a vial of blood, and either the nurse will transport the blood to a blood center at $60 an hour in California and mileage, plus the time away from the patient. We eliminate that. We do the test right where the patient is. We do it with point-of-care test cartridges that already exist. They're already FDA cleared. They're already CLIA waived, and we adapt to them. That's the first piece of interoperability. Not in the way that you describe it here, but it's very flexible. It's an open system. We call it an open platform. There's a software open platform. Well, now we have a hardware open platform that's actually expandable with modules. We're non-cost additive. We actually replace things. We replace having to do the blood testing the old way. We do it right where the patient is, and we send the data up to the cloud. And we're doing a pilot with HNC, and our data is going into their cloud and going into an electronic health record where it's reusable. What was the term I learned here? Can't remember the acronym now. But it was that you get the data, you can reuse it, you can do stuff with it. It's 4 letters, it starts with an F, but it's not that one. So here's what's being done today. The nurse goes to a home. If they need to do a lab, then the nurse draws the blood, and if it's a sensitive kind of test, they sometimes have to go right to the lab and before they can see another patient. So it's very expensive, it's cumbersome. The nurse can't always see the 5 patients that they're supposed to see a day. And what we do is streamline. So now we have a streamlined process. The nurse goes to see the patient. If they need a lab, they do the lab by the patient bedside. They get the answers. The answer goes up to the cloud. And that's where you guys take over. It's very easy. Saves money. The patient, I mean, let's not forget about the patient. You get results in 3 to 5 minutes, and a diagnosis can be done right then. It's also a revenue stream. Let's talk about the money a little bit. So HCOs can make a little bit more money. There are some excited people out there who are using the old system. Almost nobody knows that this is going to be coming out. When they find out about it, they want to know more. And those cartridges all have CPT codes, so they're all reimbursable. So this is our system. Let me grab some sample cartridges, show and tell. So this is our prototype. We're having some more made right now, a little bit different design. Here's an example of an adapter module that allows you to adapt a cartridge to the system. So we would take a cartridge like this one and stick it into the adapter module. So there's a single function reader that reads these cartridges already. But what we do is, not only can we read this one, but here's an example of what they call lateral flow, which is an optical read. The other was an electrical read. We can read this one. And then for a different shape, this will be the last one. This is a hemoglobin lateral flow. It's smaller than this slot that we have for an adapter. We built an adapter. It's all about modularity and adapters. Now we can read that smaller cartridge in the same system. So it goes on and on. We have a Qubit format we developed, and then we have modules for expandability. So we can expand the functionality of the box itself. More horsepower, transceiver to a satellite, what have you. It's pretty much endless. So we're in the center. We have the custom module. This is actually the only thing that's designed and manufactured by us. We've got the enclosure, but that doesn't really count. Everything already works. The phone works. There's an embedded phone that runs the system. That's the operator display that you see. That's the front of a phone. That works. The cartridges work. The link up to the cloud works. So there's no magic. and it's very reliable that way. So we just harness it all together in a new and novel way to create the system. Oh, I should mention, there's a concept drawing below of what some of the production units might look like. So we're working on that right now. So our business model is to go out and find people, companies who make these cartridges. And we look for people that have been already successful in the hospital area, in the physician's office area, and want to expand out to the home area and create incremental income. And that home area is growing really fast. So it's a great opportunity. And we're going to be there first, I hope. The only thing done at home right now in a big way is blood glucose. PT-INR is done pretty often. But the other kinds of tests that you draw a vial of blood for and order the test to be done, almost none of them are done at home. Big market, you all know that. We're part of a $300 billion business. The device side that we're actually addressing is a $51 billion business. It's huge. These are some of the test areas that we're going to be handling over time, the kinds of things that care providers need to know how a patient is doing. So it's a little bit about our team. Kevin Huttman has spent 25 years in the diagnostics industry with Abbott IDEX and DuPont. And George Fu is our supply chain operations expert. I worked with him at Hewlett Packard. He's the best. He ran purchasing for Ireland and Puerto Rico for HP. And we have a great advisory board, Larry Krishka. Some of you may know him, very top of the point of care area. He's a past president of the AACC. Been extremely valuable. Howard Robin, another valuable guy. Jim Smith used to live near here. He worked for Ford Motor as a CFO. So he had some great advisors. This is a blurb that came out in Oklahoma about the pilot that HNC and iAssay are involved in the Watts area. It's very exciting. For us, it's a good pilot because the only difference between what we plan on doing for homes and what's happening at this pilot is a patient walks in the door instead of the nurse. So this is a pilot set up in a church in Watts and the Salvation Army right now. And the patients walk in, they get vitals taken, they have some testing done. HNC system is there, so they do stethoscopes, they do blood pressure, and all this. I don't think they're charging patients, but I'm not sure. But it's as if the nurse went in the door. So for us, it's a great pilot. We get side-by-side data and try out things, and it's wonderful. So that's really about the end of what I have to say. There was a quote that I had. It was from George Bernard Shaw, and it's sort of me encapsulated. Some people see things as they are and ask why, and I dream of things that never were and ask why not. Many people think that was Robert Kennedy, but it wasn't. It was George Bernard Shaw. But this is sort of my lifetime mantra, personally and professionally. So what if you think it won't work? I think it will. And I find out quickly, yeah, it does work. And then eventually prove it to everybody else, and they go, why didn't I think of that? Because you thought it was difficult and you thought it was impossible. So I believe in the impossible. I believe in what you're doing in the room strongly. I want to learn more. I want to participate more, because this is what we need to do. Cost of healthcare is too high. I think it was Dr. Baird said it's still out of control. Joe Smith, who was the previous, I think, CMO of West Health, about 3 years ago, he said, at this current rate, the whole US GDP will go to healthcare by 2030 if we don't stop it, which I found amazing. But from what Dr. Baird showed us and what I think that we need to move fast. So I thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for the invite. Dr. Shaya, I thank you for bringing this to my attention. It's been great. Thank you very much.
So, how do we go back? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. It's an opportunity, a great honor and a privilege to be here today. I first wanted to thank MiHIN, especially Tim Pletcher and Jeff Livesay and David Livesay, for just the honor of being here today. I always want to thank my wife. Samantha is home with our 3 kids under 4 for allowing me these opportunities. We also have a connection to San Diego. My wife's from San Diego, and no one believes she left San Diego for me. So we live in very interesting times. Healthcare today is changing. You mentioned a statistic, Lonnie. Let me give a real statistic, another real statistic. U.S. healthcare today is the 5th largest economy in the world today, and it's going to be the 4th largest by 2020. So think of that. I mean, we're talking countries here. Healthcare is not immune to disruption, albeit the changes, the disruption have not come as quickly as other industries. Uber is one of the largest transportation companies in the world, and they own no automobiles. Alibaba is one of the largest retailers in the world. They own no inventory. Airbnb is one of the largest accommodation providers, and they own no real estate. More and more companies that are disrupting different industries are asset light, data rich, and they're learning how to leverage that data and information. Some of the ways that healthcare is changing, of course, leveraging big data, leveraging digital type of technologies, and again, all of it's focused on improving clinical outcomes and achieving cost efficiencies. There's a lot of different types of there's a lot of different ways to approach innovation out there. Again, I believe the way that will achieve the greatest disruption is leveraging data and information. No one person has all the answer. That's where the challenges and that's where the opportunities arise in U.S. healthcare. So the stakeholders have to come together. We got to put together the proverbial dream team. MiHIN certainly has done a great job in bringing a lot of the key stakeholders together, not just here in Michigan, but nationally. And that's what it's going to take to really move the needle. These solutions have to be patient-centric, provider-directed, and payer-coordinated. And as most people know in this room, that's not easy to achieve. Just very briefly about J&B. J&B is a family-owned enterprise. My mother owns 51%. My father owns 49%. So we say my mother's boss at home and at work. But we have 16 different enterprises. We have customers in 48 states, 28 countries. We run the gamut from medical distribution to specialty distribution. Most people know us as one of the largest third-party billers of consumable medical products to the homes of the United States. And we also have a telemedicine telehealth company called HealthNet Connect. We have one of our representatives here outside. Well, digital health is slowly but surely starting to take hold in this marketplace. One of the challenges has been the technologies and advancements are ahead of the incentives, but that is slowly changing. The next generation of accountable care organizations is going to pay for urban telemedicine and remote patient monitoring. More and more self-insured populations are covering such visits. Michigan has been one of the most progressive for Medicaid, where there's parity if seeing a patient in person and seeing them virtually. And that's what it's going to take to really advance and disrupt healthcare. Also, there's a fairly significant paradigm shift going on. It's going from patients to consumers. So folks like my father, I would consider a patient. Folks like myself is more consumer driven. We want access and we want convenience, and that trend is going to continue. The number of virtual visits is growing dramatically. 2015, about 20 million visits. They say about 2020, there'll be 160 million virtual visits. And it's just that trend's going to continue. And again, that's part of the consumerism. That's part of the incentives more aligning with these new technologies. And so it's not going to be telemedicine or telehealth or virtual care. It's going to be healthcare. It's all going to be one. There's a lot of pillars that it's going to take to move the needle. Of course, data and analytics, care coordination, you know, the various different technologies, integrating, interoperability is going to play a huge role. That's one of the biggest challenges right now. CMS, if you look at their numbers just on Medicare, the lack of interoperability cost, depending on whose numbers you believe, in excess of $30 billion to the Medicare system today. And so that's, you know, the more we can integrate, the more interoperability we can achieve, the more efficiencies we're going to achieve as well. A lot of people think the future of healthcare are the gifted gadgets, the gifted gizmos, these new technologies. The reality is the future of healthcare is the data and information along with the back-end care coordination. So the future of healthcare is not tech, T-E-C-H. The future of healthcare is tech, T-E-C-C, technology-enabled care coordination. So whoever can take this data and information and do something with it, that's who's going to make a difference. There's a lot of cool things like, you know, iAssay and iAssay-like companies out there, but it's the people that are going to do something with the information that are really going to advance these innovations. So a couple quotes here. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them, Albert Einstein. Well, that applies to healthcare in so many ways, and I think more and more people are changing how they see things, how they view things, but it's a slow pace. I mean, if you look at the financial industry, you know, we started with the Federal Reserve, then we have the bank branches, then you have ATM machines. Now people take a picture of their checks and deposit it. But that natural progression, that same progression has not yet occurred in healthcare. We are headed in that direction, but it's a much slower process. So telemedicine, we define as healthcare professional to healthcare professional. There's a lot of different versions of telemedicine out there. Remote patient monitoring, we define as healthcare professional to patient. And again, there's a tremendous amount of advancement there. It's more and more going mobile now. Of course, there's some security challenges with that, but again, everything's advancing. Whether it's telemedicine, telehealth, video conferencing, mobile apps, sensors, we are all going to live in a connected health environment. That is an undeniable fact. That is where we're going to go. The question is, how do we get there? I think one of the keys to achieving these advancements will be how we leverage data, and there's a lot of different data visualization tools out there, executive dashboards. 85% of folks learn better from seeing pictures. I know I do. And so there's so much data and information out there, but how do you put it in a way that it can be leveraged? There's a lot of different uses that are really getting some traction out there in this whole new connected health environment. More and more employers are providing access to folks on site where you can use a nurse or a physician to triage situations real time. I think that, especially for larger employers, is becoming more prevalent. Assisted living, skilled nursing facilities, 70% of readmissions come from skilled nursing type facilities. So, and now with the new changes, they are going to be, the nursing homes, skilled nursing facilities are going to start getting penalized for readmissions as well. So a lot of folks are looking for ways to mitigate that, and connected health strategies are a big part of those discussions. One area that we're particularly been focused on is maternal fetal medicine. Here in Michigan, Hurley Hospital is using virtual technology to provide maternal fetal medicine consultations in very remote parts of Michigan, and that program has showed tremendous promise. And again, Michigan's a big place. Access is a big issue, and access to specialists is an even bigger issue. So those are programs that I think are going to continue to advance, and especially with Michigan under the Medicaid population having parity, I think there's tremendous opportunities to advance those initiatives. Of course, behavioral health is a significant opportunity as well. We're working with some Native American Indian tribes. It's pretty incredible. Just one particular tribe, about 400,000 lives, 50% diabetes, 42% alcoholism, 45% behavioral health issues. Again, they don't have access to these type of specialists. So again, another opportunity area for leveraging technology, technology-enabled care coordination. And of course, 75% of healthcare costs are chronic diseases, diabetes, CHF, COPD, and the challenge has been overall in this whole telemedicine, telehealth world is that there hasn't been really a viable business model to all of this. There's been a lot of science projects. There's been a lot of testing. That's part of innovation, right? Trial and failure. But really, the way to make these things viable has been a struggle. Someone who spoke here a couple years ago, Major General Elder Granger, he was the gentleman that set up TRICARE. He went from Champus to TRICARE, and he had some very promising results. He was using telehealth, but literally just the telephone, and calling these high-risk, high-costing, high-opportunity patients. And on chronic disease patients, he was able to show fairly significant annualized savings. And a lot of our discussions have been around, could we take these programs and use advanced technology and make more of a difference in clinical outcomes, quality, and cost? I think one of the most important ways to leverage data and technology, everything's going to this whole population health optics, is identifying, again, these high-risk, high-costing patients, 5% of populations costing 49% of the dollars. And so if you can identify who's most likely to have an event, there you can have some sort of advanced engagements, whether it's face-to-face visits, whether it's monitoring, surveillance, and then as you go down the population health pyramid, you go to monitoring and surveillance, and then just surveillance. And nobody's really kind of put that whole thing together, but it really starts with the data and information and really identifying, again, the high-risk, high-costing, high-opportunity folks, and then everyone else. We truly believe healthcare is a right. It's not a privilege. We have several humanitarian projects going on around the world, and there, access to someone virtually is not a nice to have. It's either have that or have nothing. So in Ghana, we're taking care, we have our technology in several places. We've had several HIV patients that we've successfully treated recently. In Pakistan, we're taking care of 75,000 mothers and children that never had access to health care, and that will be 1 million lives September 1st, and there's many other such cases. So on a kind of separate track, there's this domestic track here where technology in many cases is nice to have and helpful, but on the humanitarian side, it's a must-have in many, many places. So we see tremendous opportunities globally for that. One statistic, there'll be 7 billion people by 2021 that are connected via the internet, So again, with this improved connectivity, there are opportunities to utilize healthcare and provide access to care. One of my favorite quotes from Gandhi, "You must be the change you wish to see in the world." Let's face it, things are a little challenging in Washington, D.C. these days, and I think more and more, on the state level, a lot of these initiatives are going to be advanced. Just one last thing, the digital health world, there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of hype out there. It's very, I think, analogous to the dot-com times from 1995 to 2000, 4,700 dot-com companies went public. Today, less than half of them are around, and only a handful of them have achieve their potential. The ones that have are massive, and you're going to see a lot of that in this digital health arena. I don't think there's any real leaders out there. There's a lot of people doing a lot of good things, but it's really kind of a maturing market. And so as you look for opportunities and as you look for partners, that's something you need to keep in the back of your mind, that it's a changing tide, and a lot of folks may not be around in the next few years. One of the big things, being a physician, a lot of these innovations, and new approaches, people have been slow to embrace, where other industries, again, have been much more aggressive. One interesting statistic from 1955 to today, there's only 61 Fortune 500 companies that have been around during that period of time. So about 70% of them are no longer around. And the life expectancy of a Fortune 500 company is 15 years and declining. So those people, those entities, those organizations that embrace innovation and embrace disruption, they're the ones that have a better chance to thrive, and folks that don't may be left behind. So I know in healthcare that's something that a lot of folks don't want to embrace, but it is reality. In our world today, the value of data-driven companies is I mean, you could just look at the slide there. I mean, you look at the companies that their market caps are the highest. They're the ones that are leveraging data, and there's been significant changes in the economics of the world. I mean, being here from the Motor City, who would have thought that General Motors and Tesla's market cap is comparable? I mean, think about that. And so the way that companies position themselves for the future, having a strategy, whatever industry you're in is going to play a key role, again, in the companies that are going to rise to the top. One of the biggest challenges up to date with all this digital health world has been the business model. The Uber for healthcare, the doctor on demand, more often than not has not been a sustainable model, and there's companies that are public. You can go look at their public filings, and most of them are losing fairly substantial amounts of money. So I think there has to be more of a risk-based approach to these digital health companies and how they leverage their business model, and I think that's going to be critical. But again, not too many folks are doing it today. Just buying the gifted gadgets and gizmos, we don't believe it's going to be the answer. And again, the ones that embrace interoperability, integration, leverage data, we think those folks have the best chance to be the winners. And just kind of summing it up, Steve Jobs, because the people who are crazy enough to change the world are the ones who do. We truly believe it. There are a lot of challenges in healthcare right now, but the folks that embrace those challenges, really have great opportunities. And so again, MiHIN, thank you for being one of those folks that are embracing the challenges, and thank you for everyone for the opportunity today.
Good afternoon. Raise your hand if you are from a medical institution or hospital. Okay. And what about a medical group or other entrepreneurs on the service side? Okay. Raise your hand if you're more programming and tech, hardware, software. Okay, it's an interesting mix. One of the speakers earlier today said he read some but not all of the 21st Century Cures Act. I was one of those unfortunate people who did read the entire 21st Century Cures Act. And what was really notable to me among the other provisions were the statutory sections with regard to the creation of the Healthcare Information Technology Advisory Committee. Okay? This is a sort of a GAO vehicle. They're eliminating their two interoperability, the policy and the standards groups, created a new one. In that, they identified two sections. Their paramount, their first-tier priorities, and their second-tier priorities. Is anybody familiar with this whatsoever? Okay, good. The first one was the obvious. Let's talk about standards. Let's talk about interoperability. Let's talk about technical functionality. Fine, that's important. The second, in my opinion, is even more important. It's, okay, what then, right? How do we actually use this functionality when we have it? How will we benefit from it? To what end are we convening these conferences, talking over lunch about technical protocols and standards and communication pathways? And that is when they talk about how are we going to use this technology to service people who don't have it, to care for underserved populations, to enhance and improve the way in which we deliver meaningful healthcare services. I think telehealth right now is at the forefront, the most powerful example of the intersection of technology and the delivery of healthcare service that we have available today. That's what I'd like to talk about with you for a few minutes. Steve's slides were actually very rich and textured. I know he had to gloss over a number of provisions. I would urge you to reread some of those. Some of the bullet points that he didn't even touch on, but were contained in there, represent powerful, sustainable business models. And I know he said that he thinks most people don't have these. They're not actually, maybe a little bit more smoke and mirrors, or they're not creating sustainable models. I would agree that there are a number of companies out there, but I would disagree that nobody has it. You know, we work with, I think it's fair to say, our law firm, 1,000 lawyers, offices across the country, including Michigan. It's fair to say we do more of this telehealth work than any firm in the country, probably the world. And we do see these. We help build out these sustainable, scalable business models that make sense when delivering care across distances through technology. You should not have to rely on developing new patients through having your doctors give presentations at the local library about joint replacement to senior citizens. You should not have to predicate your patient intake on putting a billboard up on a street corner saying our emergency department wait time is 5 minutes with an LED display that can change to 6 minutes, right? If someone is going to the emergency department, presumably they have not planned to do so and are not taking into consideration the amount of wait time that they will incur, okay? At the same time, there are systems in your state which are doing phenomenal things. Trinity Health, in disclosure, it's one of our clients. They have created 10 years ago the Michigan Stroke Network. Has anyone heard of this? Right? That is a phenomenal example of using telemedicine and destination medicine in a B2B institutional model to drive revenue and actually deliver high quality care, and at the same time externally brand it as something more than just Trinity. It has its own website. It has its own 800 number, one single 800 number across the entire state. There are 19 different participating hospitals and facilities, and think of all the patients that have benefited from this telestroke model by reducing the door-to-needle time for TPA. That is life-saving work, that is sustainable, scalable business work, and then you own the marketplace across the entire state. You can bring that up and make that national. Hospitals and health systems are doing so right now. And in fact, there's a quote, I'm sure I'm going to mangle it because I feel compelled to do a quote because my other two co-speakers did, from John Noseworthy, the CEO of Mayo Clinic, is another client of ours. Basically said, in 10 years from now, there will emerge just a few medical centers with a reputation for international excellence that patients will come to receive that high quality of care from across the world. Now, that's an abbreviated version. The flip side of that is if you are not one of those medical centers or health systems, the patients will go to your competitors, right? That will mean revenue for them, but it'll also mean more meaningful opportunities for the physicians and healthcare providers who work at those centers. Ergo, they will attract and recruit the next generation of people interested in working on the most exciting, most innovative type of healthcare. And then the quality and skill set of your own medical staff and provider bench will deteriorate. We're seeing it happen. It will continue to happen. I also agree with Steve when he says there's a multitude of healthcare providers popping up. I don't know if that's a bubble, but I do think it portends mergers and acquisitions activity, of course. We are in a period that I kind of refer to as the democratization of healthcare. The technology is alarmingly inexpensive. The sophistication of the legal structures and the business models are out there. My partner Steve Hilfinger is here. We could set up over the weekend a national telehealth provider medical group. We need a physician to own it. Steve could be the owner, for example, and deliver healthcare services to patients via telemedicine across the United States. Does that mean the three of us should be doing this? Well, that's not for me to answer, but is it possible and available today? Yes, and that's why we're seeing this proliferation. There are a multitude of business models available within the telemedicine space. It's hard to see on the screen, but this is an inside joke on the hub and spoke model. You could take that, the Michigan Stroke Network as one, where in the center is the expertise and the excellence, the physicians, and surrounded are the hub sites, right? The spoke sites where the patients are located. Each one of these bubbles represents an entire business model that you can use within the telemedicine space. Do not think so linearly that telemedicine just means a direct-to-consumer model like Teladoc. I mean, I would even argue that Teladoc is not even a direct-to-consumer model so much as a cost containment play for health insurers and other payers, and a care diversion play by changing the site of service from a physician's office or an urgent care center to the affiliated medical group. Revenue. Raise your hand if you work for a provider in Michigan that gets, enjoys coverage or reimbursement of telehealth services from a commercial payer. Well, women in the denim shirt, well done, congratulations. It's no surprise. 31 states plus the District of Columbia have these so-called telehealth commercial coverage laws, right, which they are purportedly designed to require that a health insurer cover a service delivered via telehealth if that same service were covered if delivered in person, right? Namely, so I have my health benefit package with my payer, and they say, all right, Nate, you pay me a premium of $1,000 a month, we'll cover 500 services. I get an E&M code if I walk in person, it's covered. If I choose to have that person that service delivered via telehealth, it's covered. Michigan has one of those statutes. Unfortunately, I probably think it's the worst, if not the second worst statute in the entire country. It basically says a health plan can cover telehealth services if it wants to, right? And I have no idea why your legislature passed such a bill. It basically says, here's a bill that does nothing. And then your legislature also passed another bill recently in December, which promulgated telehealth practice standards. I'll talk about it in a moment. And it included a footnote. It said, by the way, this doesn't change our telehealth coverage bill. Health plans still are not required to cover it, only if they want to. So it's kind of a shame to have such a toothless bill. But even in a state without a telehealth coverage law whatsoever, if you as a provider approach the health plan, the payer, with a proper case, here's the use case, here's the reason why you should cover our telehealth services, right? Odds are they will do so. We do this with our clients do it themselves. They're 80% of the time successful. And all it takes is we have even a template. It's like a 3-page amendment or an addenda to your provider participation agreement with the plan. It says, you know what, it's going to be for 12 months. Here's the list of services. We'll list the CPT codes. We'll tag it with the GT or GQ modifier to show it was delivered via telehealth. You'll pay us for it. If you don't like it, and then you'll monitor patient satisfaction and track the utilization metrics, show you it's not going to cost the health plan an exorbitant amount of money, even on a fee-for-service basis. And if you don't like it, plan after that 12-month period, you're welcome to terminate it. Most healthcare participation agreements with payers are terminable without cause on 60-day notice anyhow. It's very little risk for the health plan. You're not asking them to change the policy for all the providers, just for you. And I would really urge you to do so. That will immediately give you one of those bubbles, right? External reimbursement via commercial payers. But each one of those bubbles represents another source of revenue. And I really urge our provider clients to say, don't use the word reimbursement. Shift your mindset when you're talking about virtual care services to revenue. Reimbursement to me connotes a government-paid fee-for-service methodology. And the power and the advantage of these telehealth-based services moving toward population health really behoove alternate sources of revenue. Even the virtual ICU or the eICU service, Mercy Virtual is one very well-known company delivering that, has been shown to save a health system or a hospital that purchases it millions of dollars every year, reducing length of stay, which is a key metric for profitability for a hospital, reducing unnecessary admissions and hospital-acquired conditions, even after you calculate the cost of paying for the service. Think bigger. Here is a telehealth contract, as easy as I could possibly make it for you, okay? The blue distant site, that is where the doctor is, okay? The green originating site, that's where the patient is. If these terms make no sense for you, to you, that's because the government came up with these terms, Okay, I did not. The distance site provides the services, and they also do their own credentialing. There's a notion of, it's called proxy credentialing. It's a great vehicle that the originating site, which might be a rural hospital, maybe only have one person in their medical staff, they do not have to do credentialing over and over again. They can rely on the distance site hospital's credentialing. It saves a ton of time for your go live, saves money. In exchange, the originating site pays for the service, and then they give reports. They say, look, we need to tell you about the quality of the services provided via telehealth. Otherwise, how are you going to actually exert oversight? And that's as easy as it is, and but let's make that a little bit bigger, shall we? Well, first let me talk about the financial methodology. Here's the compensation approach. You could do a fee for service, pure fee for service, or you could do a recurring fee, or you could do a hybrid. This makes a huge difference in a virtual service where you don't have that same face time, okay? If you do a fee for service play, then you're saying you're only going to pay me when we deliver the service. I discourage that for a number of reasons, including compliance reasons, because as the distance site hospital, it costs you money to provide the technology and make your physicians available. That should be compensated. But more importantly, in a pure fee-for-service model, we see only maybe 0 to 2% utilization. Nobody wins if there is no utilization. Both parties want to use these services. If you have a pure capitated, right, a per patient per month or a subscription fee, you could see up to 30% utilization. And there's ways to have even modifiers to a capitated arrangement. Say, oh, if it's going too high, then we just do a percentage upward adjuster so that the hospital providing the services isn't fully at risk and could be underwater. I really like a hybrid that seems to be very attractive. A monthly recurring fee plus an encounter-based fee. But let's make this bigger. Here we have the statewide telemedicine network, like the Michigan Stroke Network. It's providing services and getting payment. And then you can have an organic development of referrals after the trusted services that are being provided. You say, wow, these are excellent providers. Let's fold them into our fray. Let's take it a step bigger. A nationwide destination medicine center. Is anyone here from the University of Michigan? University of Michigan has an online second opinion program. It's not as sophisticated as some other providers out there, but they do have one, and you should be applauded for that. Mass General Partners Healthcare, I think they have an excellent one. Again, they're a client I should disclose. UCSF, Cleveland Clinic, they all have them, and you can use them to attract patients. In fact, MD Anderson's online second opinion for cancer generated so many patient requests that the CEO said, no, we will only provide these second opinions if the patient says that they will go to MD Anderson for treatment. Because we are in the business of providing cancer treatment, not cancer opinions, and as a result of the influx of requests, we now have a 3-4 month wait period before someone can actually even get treatment. That is an example of overwhelming success of a model. And where are those patients coming from? They're not coming from the local geography of MD Anderson in Texas. They're coming from around the country, possibly including your backyard. One step bigger, international. We do a number of projects, especially in the last maybe 2 years. In China alone, we've probably done like 8, okay? China and the Middle East, I think, are the areas of biggest attraction right now for a US-based medical center to have an international telemedicine arrangement. And I give this example here. You just email me. It's about an 80-page booklet we put together, some members of our team, including our China practice. It's called the Healthcare Provider's Guide to Building U.S. to China Telemedicine Arrangements. So it's pretty easy. You can find it on our website, but if you have trouble, just shoot us an email. And it have all the stuff you need to strategically build it out, including a translation of China's telemedicine guidance that their National Health and Family Planning Commission put out from Chinese into English. Now, I would be remiss as a lawyer if I didn't include some legal provisions here. And this is called Telemedicine Practice Standards. And I'll only be about a minute or two. I see that. These are not standards of care. This is not quality of care. This is not scope of practice. These represent the arbitrary or artificial rules that a medical board may put out with regard to practicing medicine through technology. And it is the dark side of asking for permission or affirmative rules. Many states, including Michigan, for years were able to successfully and safely deliver services via telemedicine without having a set of rules from LARA or from the legislature on what they can and cannot do when doing so. But Michigan does have some rules that came out in December, but they're actually very favorable to you. There's no express in-person exam requirement, no originating site restriction, no requirement that the patient have someone with him or her. The modality is flexible. It need not be just real-time audio video. They do allow remote prescribing of medications, and just this last March, the governor signed an amendment to say, you know what, you can also prescribe controlled substances, which is hugely important for the mental health industry, as pharmacologic management is a cornerstone of mental health treatment. And you do require informed consent. But beyond that, and I should mention for all of those interested, Lara was given the option in the December statute of promulgating regulations. They did not do so. And then in the May statute, they are now required to promulgate regulations. And so anyone involved in the telehealth space should take that, if they want to, reach out to the department and maybe consider recommending them be very thoughtful in the process, because what we're seeing in many states that have promulgated regulations on practicing via telemedicine, they regret it a few years later, because these rules that are designed to help promote innovation and technology now wind up restricting it because the tech advances so fast. Beyond in-person exams, there's a multitude of rules. I broke them down for federal, state, and international. Yes, there's a lot. Yes, it's complicated, but there are pathways and solutions to build out these models that are legally compliant, scalable, and sustainable. Others are doing it. You can too. Take this back with you, share it with your lawyers or whatnot, and use it as a checklist for your compliance purposes. And there's my contact information, and thank you very much for having us.
Well, I guess there's a lot more to telehealth and telemedicine than just watching the surgery channel. So thank you. We are bleeding into our next segment, but we will take one or two quick questions. Back here. Let's get this one teed up.
Thanks. I'll go.
Okay.
Thank you. And the congressional, so my name's Andy Petrovich from Altarum Institute. The congressionally mandated healthcare cybersecurity task force recently released their report on the state of IT security in healthcare. And it's not exactly a happy report. The dismal state of IT security in healthcare was largely attributed to the push for connectivity. And given that this is a visionary panel, I feel it's appropriate to maybe ask a big question. But from your legal and entrepreneurial perspectives, what is the future of securing patients' electronic health information? Thanks.
Anybody want to take it? That is a real crystal ball question. It's hard to say. You know, I do think that we will get there, because in order for any of these models that Steve talked about or that I talked about to really take it to the next level and become powerful, they're going to need to have access. These even companies that set up sort of the personal health record so that your doctor can check it out, it's neat, but on a larger scale, it's a bit of a novelty, because even that isn't going to be interoperable. I do, though, have faith that with the creation of these new initiatives that we're going to get somewhere. I think at some push comes to shove, it's going to have to break. And I think that some of the largest EHR systems out there, they're already planning for it internally.
Thank you. Here, and then I think Tim maybe has a question.
Thanks. I'm Alicia Meyer. I'm with Huron Valley Physicians Association, which is an independent physician network. And we're just starting telemedicine in our PO. And I was just wondering, and we're looking at it as sort of a competitive advantage thing. So we want to use it in small independent offices to basically be competitive in our geographic region. And I was wondering if you could give some insight into basically how you see independent, small, like 1-2 doc offices using the types of technologies that you guys discussed and the strategies that you guys discussed to really kind of jumpstart and be more visible and more competitive in an area.
Maybe I'll take that one. So, great question. Thank you for that. A couple things I've seen over the last, let's say, 5+ years as we've gone down this path. A lot of people have wanted to try telemedicine, telehealth, whatever, digital health, but it was more of a science project. It was more, there was no real strategy around how to to grow something, how to advance it. It was really, let's just try it out. And there's been several cases where people have tried using different technologies, not just ours, but just, you know, there's a multitude of them out there. And then, you know, I hear, okay, well, now what? So to really, you know, implement, I think there has to be a connected health strategy. It's got to be, it's around, you know, legal, regulatory is part of that discussion. But that's where I think people are falling short. Right now it's a checkbox for a lot of people. Okay, I have some sort of telehealth or telemedicine solution out there, so check. But there's no real way how to scale it. I guess the question comes up in this whole continuum of care, how much of the interaction between patient and provider can be done virtually? We truly believe a fair amount of it, not 100%, because healthcare is very personal. People want to deal with people, you know, that they know and they trust and they're comfortable with. But do all your follow-up visits have to be done in person? Probably not. And especially in small to mid-sized practices that are trying to remain competitive in this increasingly challenging environment, you know, how much of that interaction can be done virtually? And we truly believe a substantial amount of it can, depending on, and we're dealing with some ACOs, depending on, you know, we've seen a range from up 30% of the interaction to up to 70%. And of course, it depends on the you know, the mix of, you know, the mix of the population. And so, so I think there needs to be a lot of thought. I think there needs to be a roadmap. I think it needs to be incremental. It's baby steps. The one other thing I will add to that, healthcare is becoming more personalized. One of the mistakes that we've seen in these models is there's an opt-in and an opt-out, okay? So the model that we've seen successful is patients that opt in to this. You know, certain people, no matter what, you're not going to change them, and they're not going to embrace this. But where we've seen a lot of success in these kind of ACOs are the folks that say, okay, this is an option, but you have to opt in, you have to choose it, versus, you know, we're going to choose that you're going to get this. It's a nuance, but it's actually a very significant nuance. And so I'll just stop there.
And in one example of a program that you could do, is this on? Yeah. For a small practice, mental health or medical, would be after hours, offering the telehealth after hours, whether it's through the MD or the PA or whatnot, right? And then you increase the throughput, and so you can actually increase the profitability, reduce the likelihood that your patients will go to a walk-in center after hours, reduce the pressure during the 9 to 5s of how patients are stacked double booked, right? It can make it a more enjoyable practice. And I think that's just an obvious example. And the technology for some of that is impossibly cheap. You do not need to buy some high expense program with all the bells and whistles. You just need a telehealth software for the communications portal as an add-on.
Thank you. Tim, last question.
I'll go really quickly. Boy, this telehealth stuff, it looks like it's continuing to fragment healthcare. Should there be any expectation that anybody who's engaged in a telehealth service somehow puts the results and the data back into the ecosystem so everybody else knows? And if there should be, what should that look like?
Well, I'll take a first stab at it. So getting to this whole, you know, again, looking at a population, you know, the way we view it is there are, you know, kind of three aspects to managing these populations. You've got, of course, the technology that's, you know, connecting the patients, the providers, the payers. You've got the integration, interoperability component, and you've got the data and analytics. So our view, it needs to be one ecosystem. And so with certain payers that we are working with, that's the case, and of course we're connected with their cloud. But when you start going to, you know, as you know, I mean, you know, folks don't just go to one hospital system, they don't just go to one provider, they don't just go, you know, and one pharmacy chain. So, you know, that's the challenge, Tim. That's the challenge, is that you know, that's where it needs to get. We need to, you know, it needs to be, you know, available for everyone. The challenge, of course, security. There's, you know, the incentives right now, the EMRs, you know, no offense to any of the big EMR companies, but the top 10 EMR companies are not in any rush to do anything because it's not mandated. They're and stuff. So, but yes, that's where it does need to go. We have seen in those situations like Native American Indian tribes that have a very, kind of stable population, there are tremendous opportunities, but in populations where people are, are moving all over the place, it's challenging.
And I would actually disagree with the notion that telemedicine inherently fragments healthcare. We've had urgent care centers and walk-ins forever, and those are just as fragmented. A lot of these telehealth offerings are from a patient's existing provider, and they may be used when the patient would otherwise say, you know what, I'm just going to go to work sick, or I'm going to grin and bear it, right? Or certainly the institutional telestroke models does no fragmentation of care. Moreover, I think the providers who are adopting and embracing this telehealth technology are the ones who are more tech forward and have the vision. Finally, a number of state laws that when they promulgate their telemedicine rules, they require the provider using telehealth, if they are not the patient's PCP, they require them to transmit a copy of that encounter to the patient's PCP within 48 hours or whatnot, because they have anticipated the fear of increased fragmentation and developing state policy to try to prevent it.
Lonnie, Stephen, Nate, thank you so much. Thank you.